Hello my beautiful people, how are you doing today? I hope you're doing wonderful. Today I come bearing a moderately requested colored pencil tutorial video. I'm gonna share with you everything I know about colored pencil. I'm gonna give you a few tips and tricks, and hopefully by the end of this you'll either have learned something or you'll be entertained. Anything, hopefully. Yeah, that being said, I am a young person. I'm 17 years old. I don't know everything about everything. I'm not a master, I'm still learning, but I just want to be here to help. I want to be here to make art, and yeah, let's get into the video. I already did my sketch beforehand with my Bic mechanical pencil, and here's my pencil sharpener. It's a Faber-Castell brand one. It's honestly such a godsend. I love using it. It makes my pencils very sharp. Would 10 out of 10 recommend. I got it from Michaels. And almost all of my colored pencils are the Prismacolor Premier pencils, with the exception of a few strays. I've mapped out any clear divides between the shadows, midtones, and highlights that I've seen in my reference picture, just so it's easier to differentiate when I'm coloring. In this video, I'm gonna draw Eva Toklu. I don't really know how to pronounce her last name. I'm very sorry if I butchered it. I follow her on Instagram and she's just so gorgeous. I had to draw her. I'll put her account in the description. The first tip I have for you guys is, before you do anything, to make sure your pencils are super sharp. I love my Faber-Castell brand pencil sharpener. I would recommend to anyone looking for one that's like worth investing in. If your pencils are sharp, then they can really get into the grain or like the pores of the paper, whatever you want to call it. Dull pencils just don't get in there as well, so it makes the drawing look less smooth and more grainy. And we want smoothness, baby. We want realness. And tip number 2, it's very helpful if you use colored pencil or Bristol paper, just because it's not as porous as something like mixed media or watercolor paper. Colored pencil paper is obviously meant for colored pencils. It's nice and smooth, it's easy to work with, especially when using sharp pencils, because again, they fill in all those tiny little pores. And I also like using Tone Tan sketchbooks by Strathmore. Those are really fun to use because it's not a solid white, and it really makes the white colored pencil pop just because the background isn't white, so I'd recommend using that if you want that certain effect. Tip number 3, when working on the skin, the first color I put down is kind of a neutral base color. For this drawing, I started on her cheek with a light brown, so I had something straightforward and comfortable to work with. Usually I would use alcohol markers as a first layer to block out my colors and shave a bit of time off the process, but for the sake of this video, I'm only going to use colored pencils just to show you that raw colored pencil process. Tip number 4, try and lightly erase your sketch as you go. It's super irritating if you get some graphite stuck under a layer of colored pencil because it's pretty hard to fix that, especially if the area you're working in has pretty light colors. So yeah, just keep your drawing clean and erase when necessary. I found that a kneaded eraser is more helpful than something like a tiny eraser on the back of a pencil or any solid erasers. So yeah, just like lightly erase, you know the drill. Tip number 5, go in circular motions or use very, very light pressure when you're shading, especially towards the beginning. This is probably one of the most important tips that I'm going to mention in this video, just because it's really time consuming, and it's just really important because it's a bulk of the work when you're using colored pencils, you know? So if you shade super lightly and gradually, it builds up a smooth texture and leaves room for blending with other colors. If you start with more pressure towards the beginning, it's significantly more difficult to work on top of that later down the line. It makes this waxy layer that's harder to blend on, so just leave room for more layers in the future in your drawing. On to tip number 6. Hold your pencils at an angle and hold it kind of farther away from the tip of the pencil so you aren't as inclined to use pressure. This will help even out your shading, and it'll prevent you from seeing those individual streaks from the pencil. Tip number 7, constantly look at your reference picture. If you're looking on a screen, make sure the brightness isn't too low so you can notice every color. It also helps to hold your drawing up to the actual picture instead of just comparing from whatever flat surface you're working on. Sometimes the angle you're sitting at can really mess with the proportions, so holding it up to the actual picture can show you where any obvious mistakes are that may have slipped by you before. Tip number 8, and this is another pretty important one, build up colors wherever you see them. This may sound self-explanatory, but I want to explain a little further because there is a bit more to it than just what I said. Skin tones are made up of so many different colors, so this is where the layers come in. I find myself personally using different shades of brown along with red, orange, yellow, maybe some pink, purple,
blue, pretty much every color I have, to be honest. And I still try to shade lightly because the layers will naturally kind of build up and saturate themselves if I just keep lightly adding colors. If you don't have a super wide range of colors, blending the ones you do have can actually benefit you a little more and help you naturally think about color theory. If you can, try and find different undertones and think about if the portrait generally has more warm or cool tones. Just as an example, after lightly shading brown on her cheek, I then went in with red, orange, yellow, pink, purple, a variety of colors wherever I saw them in the photo. And now I'm just adding a lot of brown and red wherever I see those colors. Tip number 9. Avoid using black for your shadows. We don't have much solid black in real life. It's more like a combination of dark brown and blues and purples and pretty much just every single color in different variations depending on what the shadow is, you know? So using these colors instead of black will make the drawing look a little more vibrant and closer to life. In particular, I like using violet blue, any dark brown, and Tuscan red from my Prismacolor pencils. Tip number 10. Map out where the darkest parts are closer to the beginning of your drawing process. This way you can visualize where everything is a little easier. It fills different parts in for you so you can compare it to your reference picture and then point out where different shadows are. And don't go super dark, but just lightly shade with a darker color, kind of what I did under the lips. To be honest, I don't exactly know why I'm inclined to do this. I've just seen a few videos with all types of mediums, including colored pencils, where artists do this and recommend that people do it. I think if anything, it has something to do with negative space and focusing on that before focusing on the highlights. It's kind of like making the shadows the negative space and the highlights the positive space. Which some people do tend to do. They focus on the highlights, which makes them lose sight of a lot of different aspects of the drawing. I used to do that a lot, so that's the only reason I'm saying that. But yeah, try and fill in those dark shadows first. It makes the drawing feel a little more full and a little less daunting to me. Tip number 11. Leave some white space for your highlights. It can definitely avoid a lot of trouble in the future. If you happen to color in your highlights with like too much colored pencil, you could try and use some white colored pencil to mitigate it, but it really just helps if you leave those highlights blank as much as you possibly can. Later on, you can fill in the space as necessary with white or a really light color. Tip number 12. Use warm colors for midtones and cool colors for shadows. This way you have a bit more contrast and saturation going on and you're utilizing complementary colors. I like to think that the different shades of brown kind of link the warm and cool colors together since I blend brown with pretty much every other color on the skin. Warm and cool colors alike. Tip number 13. Use certain colors consistently throughout the drawing. What I mean by this is avoid picking up a color once to use it in one certain area of the portrait, put it down, and never pick it up again. Instead, keep the consistency so the colors look balanced, you know? What helps to do this is 1, to keep your colors out in front of you instead of putting them back every time, and 2, every time you use a certain color, look at your reference picture and see where else that color can be used, and go ahead and shade wherever it's necessary. This way you're using certain colors throughout the entire piece instead of just certain sections of it. Tip number 14. Avoid using dark and harsh outlines. Although it may feel like the correct thing to do as you're rendering the drawing, we don't have outlines like that in real life, so just stick to that gradual and light shading to slowly build up the skin tone. Also, try to see if there's any rim lighting. For example, if you look on the left side of her face, towards her cheek, you can see a slight highlight but only on the edge of her face. This is something that does happen in real life, and it helps differentiate things like the edge of a face and the hair right next to it. Tip number 15. Although this goes beyond colored pencils, I want to remind you guys that using references is alright. Growing up, I would always hear every so often that you shouldn't use references because it's similar to cheating, but for art. But that's just not true. Drawing for life is really important, and references are life. They've helped me learn about colors and how certain colors are found where you could least expect it. It can potentially subconsciously help you develop your style. Even doing studies of your favorite cartoons or animes can really help you find your style and learn from different artists' work. You can even take your own reference pictures, which I love doing. Anyway, moral of the story. Reference pictures can help you practice realism because trying to draw from your imagination when you're trying to draw like an actual human person can be very, very difficult, and I wouldn't expect myself to be able to do that. Tip number 16. I know that eyelashes and eyebrows can definitely trip some people up, and I've seen countless instances where the artist uses a blunt pencil and each individual hair is kind of going up in the same direction, and the same width throughout the hair. However, small hairs like eyelashes and eyebrows go in light flicking motions, and they aren't all parallel with each other. They're all kind of curved, they're all going in their little different directions. It's really a matter of looking at the pattern of the person's hair that you're drawing. It's not the same kind of formula for everyone because, you know, everyone's features are different. My eyelashes, for example, face a little downwards because my eyes are really heavily hooded. Other people's eyelashes, though, might face more upwards due to the anatomy of their eyelids and all that jazz. So just be really attentive of how the hair grows for different people as you're drawing. Tip number 17, if you're struggling at any point with your contrast and you feel that there's not enough going on, you can always turn down the saturation in your reference photo and then look at your drawing so far and compare the two. This way you can see the difference in contrast without being distracted by all the colors. Tip number 18, avoid graininess by taking a really light color or white to blend with more pressure. This really pushes the pigment into the pores of the paper. That was some alliteration going on. And I've learned pretty recently that it has a name. Burnishing is the process of using pressure with colored pencils to blend as opposed to solvent or anything like that. This is something I've been doing since freshman year in high school, but I just learned the term as of last week. Crazy. Tip number 19, try and avoid drawing every single strand of hair or every single detail in your drawing. In this case, I thought about individual braids in terms of the hair, but what really helped me was shading in my dark areas first, just like how I had to shade the shadows in the face first. This helps fill in the hair a little more efficiently because I can map out where certain things are based on the shadows. Thinking of hair in sections really helps as opposed to one strand at a time, so just keep in mind that you can get away with a lot more shading than you think in the hair and also just in little details. Also, you don't need to put entirely too much effort as you get farther away from the face. Because the face is pretty much the focal point of the piece, the further away you get from it, the less important the details are, you know? Tip number 20. Use as many layers as you can, over and over and over. It may seem very exhausting and grueling, but I promise it pays off in the end. Colored pencil is really labor intensive and it's time consuming. What this translates to basically is that the more combinations of colors and layers that you do, the more realistic your drawing can look. Going with lots of pressure and fewer layers and fewer colors can make your drawing look flat, which can definitely take a lot away from it. This also ties into just taking your time in general. Don't feel the need to rush yourself. Which brings me to tip 21. Take your time. Many people feel rushed for a multitude of reasons, whether it's for posting on social media or they don't have enough time to draw in one sitting. But honestly, if you really want to make something that looks good, take your time, even if it means taking multiple sittings, taking multiple days to work on a piece. It really pays off to go slow and steady instead of just racing to the finish line. So you can kind of see what I was talking about earlier with the hair getting farther away from the face. The shading is definitely not as clean, but I'm alright with that. Also remember to get up and stretch and like drink water and stuff. Okay, yeah, cool. Take your little breaks. Alright, now I'm just finishing up the hair, I'm adding some of those final touches, I'm rendering everything, and we're pretty much almost done. I definitely used a lot of violet blue in the hair, but I kind of like how that turned out. The blue kind of contrasts with the warm brown, orange, and kind of like blush on her face. So, I don't know. Some people might not like it, but I like it. I think it kind of balances it out. I also added some white highlights in the hair in a kind of arched pattern to add some more texture to the braids, and I think that really tied it together and made it look a little more finished. My white Posca pen happened to conveniently die while I was filming this, so my second resort was a white Jelly Roll pen. It doesn't work as well, it's a bit streaky, but I think my pen is just dried out because I've had it for years, so yeah, don't take my word that all of them are streaky. I think it was just this one. Anyway, here's the final product. Yay! I'm pretty content with how this turned out, and I had a lot of fun drawing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you, or at the very least entertained you. Colored pencils are such a fun medium to use, and I'm really grateful that you guys are here with me as I share my artistic journey. I'm incredibly proud of this little community that we've made here, and as per usual, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Until next time, I love you, I appreciate you so much. Bye!